To discuss the Dobbs anniversary and the state of the pro-life movement today, we are joined now by two prominent national pro-life leaders. Jeanne Mancini is the president of the March for Life Education and Defense Fund, where she proudly directs the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C., the largest annual human rights demonstration in the world. And Chuck Donovan is senior advisor and founder of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, a pro-life research and education group. He has served in a number of pro-life leadership roles over the years and has played a key part in developing pro-life federal and state policies. I am so grateful to have you both here for this discussion as we're marking this 2-year anniversary of Dobbs. And I don't want to brush over the significance of that date. How will the Dobbs decision be remembered in the pro-life history books, Chuck?
Well, it's huge. It's a turning point. Americans need to keep in mind that very rarely does the Supreme Court change its mind. But we went 200 years of our history before the court somehow discovered a universal right to absolute abortion in the Constitution. That was the invention. And it took 2 centuries before anyone noticed. Madison, Jefferson, they knew. Lincoln didn't know it was there. So what happened was the Supreme Court made a huge mistake, affected all states, federal government, and now the court's finally caught up with what the Constitution actually says. We can protect life.
Absolutely. Jeanne, the significance of this anniversary.
I mean, it's massive. Like, here we are 2 years later, and I think still experiencing sort of the cultural reverberation of the overturn of Roe, and there's a lot of confusion about that, like what the overturn actually did allow, what it didn't, et cetera. Yeah. But it's so important. I mean, it's even a spiritual principle to stop and remember for a moment how incredible it is that this was overturned 2 years ago and what that was like. And all the, I mean, for me, I think about all the collective marchers, the millions of marchers over the years that you know, went before the Supreme Court to show this is not settled law.
And it came on the solemnity of Jesus's Sacred Heart, speaking of that spiritual lens. Well, to that point, in those reverberations, if you will, 2 years later, how would you describe the moment the pro-life movement is in today?
I'll start. So I'd say a little conflicted. You know, we've had some pretty serious losses, certainly when we consider the ballot initiatives. We've even seen some, you know, elected officials separating themselves or wrongly distancing themselves from this a little bit. And, you know, even just, again, the ongoing confusion, whether it's over medical emergencies, and just the overall misunderstanding about that a right to abortion is good for women. Like, it's so wrong. Yeah. But we've had lots of victories, too. I mean, many victories. So nearly half of the states in the country have enacted very life-protective laws, which 2 years ago today they couldn't have done. They couldn't, so under the Roe regime. And certainly at the March for Life, one of our victories is our growing state march initiative. This year we're in 17 states. We never knew when we began that Roe would be overturned in such a short period of time. We began in 2019, so soon we'll be in all 50 states.
That's amazing. Chuck, how would you describe this moment in the pro-life movement?
Well, I think we're catching our breath. You know, we've had a period of 50 years where 7 justices of the Supreme Court told us what abortion law would be, all the way through pregnancy, for parental rights, informed consent. And now we're in a situation where the American people have recovered the ability to decide, to legislate, to determine. And we have to relearn the civic habits of debate, persuasion, and engagement. But I'm a little encouraged, although it's bracing, to think about the history of the civil rights movement. We had a civil war, devastating losses and hundreds of thousands of lives, but it was a century later before we had a Civil Rights Act. Interracial marriage was barred in some states until 1967, segregation until 1956. So if you thought you had secured the dignity, equal dignity of slaves in 1865, it took another century before the law saw it. We have to have the same tenacity.
To look at the long game and to know that justice takes time sometimes.
It takes a long time, and also takes an active, participating citizenry. We need to do it for services and support for mothers. We need to do it at the ballot box, and we'll have some defeats along the way. We need to come back from those.
Well, I want to hit on that point. I mean, and you hit on this as well, Jeanne. Since Dobbs, it has been a string of state losses for pro-life ballot initiatives, 6 losses in a row. We are seeing many Republican lawmakers now downplay their previously strong pro-life stances. Do you see the pro-life issue as a losing issue politically? Or, you know, how are you encouraging lawmakers to stay strong on this?
Well, we can actually look just at some of the most recent campaigns, and we see that the candidates who leaned into this and who were very compassionate about the issue, but also called out their opponent very clearly, were the ones who won. So this would be like Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott, Senator Vance. I mean, so there's a number. So really, I mean, statesmen need not be afraid to be on the right side of history in this, and it's just so important to do it with compassion, with stories, and to be clear about where their opponents stand.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck, I mean, what do you think about this issue politically, and what are your words to lawmakers?
Well, I may be subject to a little bit of the Reagan distortion. I had the honor of working for President Reagan for 8 years. He was strongly pro-life. He got more pro-life as he was in office. He defended right to life in the 1984 election in debate. And he wasn't given to slicing and dicing when you could protect the unborn. And he happened to carry 49 states on a very pro-life platform in 1984. The most important thing I think the public wants is to avoid hypocrisy, stand behind your words, and actually support mothers and babies and families, along with your rhetoric about life. You do that, I think you'll do well.
This is very important in clarifying context, and our panel stays with us as we now pause for a break. We are back with our guests, Chuck Donovan and Jeanne Mancini, to continue our conversation about life after Roe and the impact of the Dobbs decision on its 2nd anniversary. The overturning of Roe has brought to the forefront other topics on fertility and women's health care, namely the role of in vitro fertilization. This is something the pro-life movement is split on. And to that point, the Catholic Church has long taught IVF is morally unacceptable, but that is not a view shared by everyone in the big pro-life movement. Here's Republican Alabama Senator Katie Britt talking about her bill with Texas Senator Ted Cruz to ensure IVF access.
IVF access is fundamentally pro-family. For the millions of Americans who face infertility every year, IVF provides the hope of a pathway to parenthood.
I mean, Jeanne and Chuck, now that Roe is overturned, for the first time in really a profound way, the pro-life movement is forced to address these topics like IVF.
It's true. It's true. I do think that what we're seeing, at least to a little bit of a degree here, is that the Democrats are vulnerable right now in their position because they are, you know, again, for abortion until birth, paid for by your tax dollars, in some states, abortion tourism. And that is out of touch with mainstream America. I mean, we know for over 15 years strong that Americans would limit abortion at most of the first 3 months of pregnancy. So 7 out of 10 Americans would do that. That said, and the March for Life does not take a stance on IVF per se. We're not an inherently Catholic organization, but it's so important for people to understand how that process works, that there is massive loss of life. I mean, in the IVF process, 90% of the embryos that are created are lost. Most of that is in the freezing and thawing process, but listen, most Americans do not understand how these processes work, and so it does allow for a wonderful moment to educate about the life, you know, destructive nature of IVF and et cetera. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Chuck, is there anything you want to say about how this is really being part of the political discussion right now?
Well, I think it's so important because the lives of these embryos, whether frozen, implanted and lost, suggested to be donated for experimentation, we think they're of equal value. It doesn't mean the end of IVF. What it does call into question is a process that puts so many lives at risk, 1.5 million destroyed that we know of, and also calls into the possibility of eugenics, where we select certain children. I think we have the right or the ability to select our children. Very dangerous. We need to slow down and debate this thoughtfully.
Absolutely. Something I do want to highlight, some good news in the pro-life movement, really are those pro-life pregnancy care centers. Chuck, I know you've done so much work and research on the abundance of their care for women and children. What role are they playing right now post-Dobbs? And from what you've seen, are pro-life pregnancy care centers, were they prepared to meet this moment?
Well, if we think back to the anniversary of Dobbs, one of the first things that happened were pregnancy centers were physically attacked. Yeah. Now, I think that's died down a little bit, but it showed the tenor of the times. But they've gone ahead. We just published a report on 2022, And pregnancy centers served almost 1 million clients, had 16 million in-person or virtual visits, performed about 500,000 ultrasounds. They have a 97.4% satisfaction rate from the mothers. And have they met it? Well, I think we've helped about half the women we need to reach. But that's a good start. We need to keep at it.
Absolutely. We've talked about how, things are a little confusing out there. There are those post-Dobbs reverberations out there, some division and disagreement in the pro-life movement on various issues. Is there a unified goal of the pro-life movement right now? And if so, what is it?
I don't know if I can say if there's a unified goal, but here's what I would say is our goal. And I'm going to guess Chuck and I are unified in this because I'm borrowing this from a Charlotte Lozier Institute report. 60% of women who chose abortion say that they would have chosen life if they had the requisite support that they needed. Our goal should be that 60%. Yeah. Whether it's getting the word out there about pregnancy care centers through this report or what have you, our goal should be that 60%. If they had the support, they would choose life. Let's let them know that they've got that support.
Chuck, you get the last word, goal of the movement right now.
Well, I'll speak from my experience of the March for Life. There's nothing more exciting than looking out and seeing 100,000 people who are less than half my age out there marching for life. Now they're going to march in the sunlight as well as in the winter light. And I'm optimistic that they'll stand up and do the right things.
Standing for life in all seasons. Jeanne Mancini, Chuck Donovan, it was a privilege to have you both here. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.